How do they recover from workplace hurt? That's the topic that we're going to address today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. And today I have an amazing expert with me. Her name is Meryl Herr. She is the owner of the Good Works Group. She previously served at Fuller Seminary's Max Dupree Center for Leadership, where she created resources to help marketplace leaders integrate their faith with work. Welcome, Meryl. I am delighted to dive into this topic with you today on Flourish-Meant.
Thank you, Tina. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
What are some of the ways that we can experience workplace hurt? Obviously, there are some that we know if you get fired, if you get reprimanded, but are there some lesser celebrated ways that we might experience hurt at the workplace that sometimes people might dismiss or not recognize?
Absolutely. In the book, I've categorized work hurt into 3 different groups. So I talk about the disappointments that we experience on the job. And those can range from things like the printer being out of ink, which I've experienced often recently, getting the toner is low message that makes you so mad, to not getting a promotion that you've hoped for. So disappointment is when something you're hoping for or expecting in the course of your work just doesn't work out. It doesn't pan out the way that you had hoped. Then I talk about disillusionment. And this is when you have some assumptions about the way things ought to go in the workplace. My boss ought to treat me with respect. My coworkers ought to be kind and collaborative. And you can fill in the blank with all of the oughts that we bring into our work. And when these assumptions are shattered in the course of our work, such as our boss says something really harsh and makes us realize, oh, maybe they don't care for me in the way that I assumed a boss would care for me. Or a coworker makes a remark that is derogatory or shaming towards us, that may make us come back and check our assumptions. Oh, maybe work isn't all sunshine and roses all of the time. And then, like you said, there are these moments of devastation that can happen in our work. And typically these are the moments when we're laid off, we're fired, or we are completely berated at work and we're brought to our knees, either emotionally, maybe even sometimes physically, because of the immense amount of pain that work causes us in those moments.
When we experience workplace hurt, it affects our sense of identity. We overinvest our identity in our work. Can you talk about why that is a problem for most all of us?
Yeah. Oh, wow. It is so hard because we find so much meaning and significance often in our work and being a worker in what we produce. And so to have work not work out for us, we do start to question that. In the book, I share the story of a teacher who started off in college, going to a teacher education program, graduated and went straight into teaching elementary school, and then ended up in a culture that was driven by standardized testing. And once he finally quit, he started to wonder, who am I? Because I thought I was a teacher. I trained to be a teacher. And if I'm not teaching, what am I doing? And so when we start to enmesh our identity with our work or a particular occupation, that becomes really troubling. But I do want to hold space in our mental frameworks and our theology for our identity being closely associated with the ways that God has gifted us and resourced us, maybe through training or experiences that we've had to engage in certain types of work. So, I may not be in a classroom setting right now, but I'm an educator. I always will be an educator. That's a very much a big piece of my identity. But if I don't get to live that out in a classroom, on a college campus, in a particular moment in time, it doesn't make it any less true. And so there's this place where we have to really recognize what's true of me in terms of how God has wired me, and maybe gifted me, given me skills that spans the whole course of my life and my story. That is probably part of our identity, our calling. But then to say if an occupation changes that I am no longer that thing, that does get really troubling, and we have to start to disentangle that. And it does take a lot of work for a lot of people.
What would be the first step to parsing out the difference between who I am and what I do?
Ah, that is such a great question. I will say the first step is to find a group of people to help you do that. That's not work that you should be doing alone. So you either need a close group of friends or family to do it with you. And if you have access to a therapist or a coach, maybe a spiritual director or mentor, those are the types of people that you want to be having these conversations with, because they know you, maybe sometimes seeing parts of you that you don't validate yourself. So that's the first step, is finding your people. But then you've got to, I like the Quaker idea of listening to your life. So go back and think about your life. Is there this common through thread? It's maybe not something you've always been passionate about, but is there something in your life that's just been this underlying theme? It's how you approach your work. Just the other day, somebody told me, they were like, you're always teaching. You're always teaching and instructing someone. And so it points back to the fact that you're an educator. Well, are you always creating? Maybe you're an artist of some kind, right? Are you always strategically thinking? Maybe you're a strategist in every room that you're in, whether it's a boardroom or a kindergarten classroom, right? So getting back to looking at what are those through threads, and then bringing that back to your community and saying, do you see this too in my life? Is this who God has created me to be? And is this how my sense of self shows up in the world?
Many of the types of workplace hurt that you mentioned are normal and should be expected, even though we don't like them. They're things that we're going to experience in any workplace, no matter where we are. How can we discern the difference between a normal level of workplace hurt and something that's informing us, A, we need to move to a different position in that company, or B, we need to find a different work environment altogether because it's toxic?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's going to vary depending on the individual, because we all have different tolerances for different types of stressors in our lives. And so, again, I would say this is something to discern in community, but there are going to be frustrating things. We are going to have to deal with interpersonal conflict in our working relationships. It's just part of being human. And we're going to have to develop the skills to have tough conversations with people. And there are going to be times when people are going to be laid off from jobs and companies are going to downsize, maybe because of economic fluctuations that are completely outside of everyone's control. And so there are going to be harmful things in the workplace that we do have to endure. But when it comes to being in a situation that is toxic, you have to look and say, is this eroding my sense of well-being? And I would say have a robust sense of well-being there, or flourishing, right? It's not just, can I get my work done, but is your engagement level at work dropping? And you'll hear some of the things that I'm going to say are going to overlap with some of how we understand the concept of burnout. But, am I feeling less engaged in my work? Am I developing a sense of cynicism about my work? Am I deteriorating in terms of health? And so the health piece, I think, is a really interesting red flag for us. So are we having trouble sleeping? Are we thinking about work nonstop? Are you anxious before you have meetings with certain people at work constantly? There could be something there that, again, is worth exploring to figure out, is this truly toxic? Work may not be a place that's always going to contribute to our flourishing in every area of our life. But if it is actively eroding your well-being, then it's time to consider making a change. Now, making a change is not always possible for everyone, right? There are some people that do not have the financial ability to leave a job, because a job provides more than just a paycheck for them. It may also provide insurance or educational benefits that they're relying on. They may not be able to afford the daycare or to take time off to go interview for a new job. And so we need to be really gracious when we start prescribing, hey, you need to get out. We might say, hey, if it's possible for you to get out of this work situation, I think you should try to figure that out. But if you can't, researchers have come up with an idea called job crafting, where if you have a little bit of agency in your workplace and maybe a good relationship with your boss, you can think of ways that you can reshape your work so that it does enhance your well-being a little bit in the meantime. So for example, if you have a coworker that is particularly ungracious, maybe you don't sit by them at lunch anymore.
So I know that you have plenty of other resources and information that you can share on this and more about workplace hurt and leadership and career skills. How can people connect with you and get themselves a copy of your new book? Give us your title and where they can find that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tina. So my book is called When Work Hurts, Building Resilience When You're Beat Up or Burnt Out. It's published by InterVarsity Press. The best place to find it is at InterVarsity's website, where you can get a free excerpt to try before you buy. You can also find me at merylherr.com. That's MERYLHERR.com. And there you can sign up for my Substack newsletter. And then I have one other way that if you can be a part of this conversation, if work has hurt you and you would be open to sharing your story with me so that maybe I can share it with somebody else, don't worry, I will obscure your identities so that we can't trace the story back to you or your employer. But if you have a story that you'd like to share, you can email me at whenworkhurts@gmail.com.
I hope that all of you who are listening who may have experienced work hurt for yourselves in your lives have been equipped and inspired and encouraged to heal. And of course, I also hope that you will come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.